Sentenced to die by Dragonfire, he came back a legend asterisk. The condemned engineered crimson sons of Valdris Prime cast long shadows across the execution grounds as Captain Ethan Blackfire knelt in the center of the ancient arena, energy chains bound. His wrists, their blue glow pulsing against his weathered skin. Around him, thousands of alien spectators filled the towering stone amphitheater, their excited chatter creating a symphony of anticipation. Ethan had been humanity's lead engineer on the secret Project Starfall, a desperate attempt to create weapons capable of fighting the Zephyrian Empire. For 3 years, he had worked alongside his team in hidden laboratories, developing technology that could potentially free the human colonies from alien oppression. But their trusted ally, Commander Voss, had betrayed them all for Zephyrian gold. High above on his obsidian throne, Supreme Overlord Kithar rose to address the crowd. The massive alien stood 12 feet tall, his crystalline skin reflecting the dying light like a prism. For arms spread wide as his voice boomed across the arena through hidden amplifiers. Citizens of the Empire, Kithar's words echoed like thunder. Today we witness the final judgment of the terrorist who dared challenge our eternal dominion. This human believed his primitive species could stand against our advanced civilization. Ethan lifted his head, meeting the Overlord's gaze with unwavering defiance. His dark hair was matted with dried blood from weeks of interrogation, but his steel-gray eyes burned with unbroken spirit. He had watched his entire team executed, one by one, yet he refused to reveal the location of humanity's remaining strongholds. The crowd's roar intensified as massive gates began grinding open on opposite sides of the arena. From the darkness emerged creatures of legend and nightmare. The first was Piraxis the Destroyer, a dragon with scales like molten gold and eyes that burned with ancient fury. Her companion, Shadowmaw the Eternal, possessed midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light itself. These were not ordinary beasts, but genetically enhanced killing machines, bred by the Zephyrians for centuries to serve as instruments of execution. Neural implants controlled their minds, turning proud creatures into mindless weapons of destruction. In 500 years of service, they had never left a victim alive. As the dragons approached, their massive claws scraping against stone, Ethan felt something stir within his memory. His grandmother, Rebecca Starweaver, had been one of the last to remember the old stories before the Zephyrian conquest. She had whispered tales of a time when dragons and humans fought side by side against tyranny, when the ancient bond between species had been stronger than any chain. Any final words, terrorist? Kithar's voice dripped with mockery. Ethan struggled to his feet, swaying from exhaustion, but refusing to show weakness. Deep within his genetic memory, words in an ancient tongue surfaced, passed down through generations of his bloodline. He spoke them softly at first, then with growing conviction. Draconum Spiritus Libertas. The effect was immediate and shocking. Both dragons stopped mid-stride, their heads snapping toward him. With sudden recognition, Piraxis made a sound that was not a roar of rage, but a whimper of remembrance. The crowd's bloodthirsty cheers died to confused murmurs. Shadowmaw tilted his massive head, studying Ethan with new interest. Ancient memories stirred in his mind, fragments of a time before the breeding pens, before the neural conditioning. He remembered flying free among the stars, remembered human hands that brought comfort instead of pain. Kithar leaned forward on his throne, his crystalline features twisting with rage. What are they waiting for? Activate the pain stimulators hidden. Technicians frantically worked their controls, sending waves of agony through the dragon's neural implants. But instead of driving them into a killing frenzy, the pain seemed to awaken something deeper. Piraxis threw back her head and roared, but it was not the sound of a mindless beast. It was a cry of anguish for lost freedom, for memories stolen and twisted. Ethan took a step toward the golden dragon, his bound hands extended in a gesture of peace. "I know you remember," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent arena. "Before they caged you, before they made you into killers, you were free." The dragon's massive head lowered until her snout was inches from his face. Her breath was hot against his skin, smelling of sulfur and ancient fires. For a moment that stretched into eternity, human and dragon stared into each other's eyes. Then Piraxis did something that sent shockwaves through the Empire. She knelt. The ancient Bond Awakens gesture rippled through the Colosseum like a physical blow. Dragons did not kneel to humans. Dragons killed humans. The natural order of the Zephyrian Empire was built on this fundamental truth. Yet here was Piraxis the Destroyer, most feared of all execution beasts, bowing before a condemned human. Ethan felt power stirring within him as he placed his shackled hands on the dragon's golden snout. The moment skin touched scale, both human and dragon gasped as memories flooded through them. Not Ethan's memories, but older ones, genetic echoes passed down through generations. He saw vast cities where humans and dragons lived as equals, their combined knowledge creating wonders that surpassed anything the Zephyrians had achieved. He witnessed the Great War that had shattered that golden age, the betrayals that broke ancient bonds, and the dark years when dragons were enslaved while humans scattered across the galaxy. But most importantly, he saw a prophecy carved in dragon script on the walls of a hidden temple, a promise that when the need was greatest, the old alliance would be reborn. The dragon riders would return. Shadowmaw approached cautiously, fighting through the pain of his neural implants. The black dragon's eyes, usually cold with programmed hatred, now burned with awakening intelligence. He spoke for the first time in decades, his voice like distant thunder. "Rider," he said in heavily accented human speech, "we have waited so long." The arena erupted in chaos. Some spectators fled in terror. Others pressed forward for a better view. And still others fell to their knees as ancient legends became blazing reality. Kithr's roar of rage echoed across the amphitheater as he activated his personal guard. Dozens of armored soldiers materialized around the arena's edge, their energy weapons charging with deadly purpose. But before they could fire, a figure dropped from the maintenance catwalks. High above, Zoe Nightblade rolled to her feet between the guards and their targets, twin plasma swords igniting in her hands. The half-human, half-Zephyrian assassin had been tracking the dragon breeding programs for months, following rumors of an ancient vault hidden beneath the Colosseum. Her exotic heritage showed in her silver-streaked hair and violet eyes, marks of genetic blending that made her an outcast in both societies. "I don't think so," she called out, her accented voice carrying years of pain and determination. She moved with fluid grace, deflecting energy bolts with crossed blades while her enhanced reflexes kept her one step ahead of her attackers. Ethan felt the energy shackles binding his wrists spark and die as Piraxis breathed gently upon them. Her flame was precisely controlled, melting alien metal without harming human skin. As the bonds fell away, power flowed through him like liquid fire. The service tunnels. Zoe shouted over the sounds of combat, "There's an escape route through the old catacombs." But Piraxis had other plans. The golden dragon reared to her full height, wings spreading wide enough to cast the entire arena floor in shadow. Her roar split the air, and this time it was answered from beyond the Colosseum walls, deep, resonant. Calls echoed from the dragon pens where hundreds of captive creatures had been held for generations. "They're calling to their kin," Ethan breathed, understanding flooding through him as the bond deepened. "They want to free the others." Shadowmaw moved like liquid darkness, engaging guards with lightning crackling along his claws. Not the painful, neural shocks of conditioning, but true dragon lightning born of storm and sky. Each strike sent soldiers flying, their weapons overloading and armor systems failing. From the viewing boxes around the Colosseum, other dragons began to stir. Thane Ironwing, a silver-scaled veteran who had watched countless executions from his cage, felt the ancient call awakening something in his blood. Neural implants sparked and failed as genetic memories overrode decades of conditioning. With a sound like breaking glass, Thane shattered his restraints and leaped from his viewing box. His landing shook the arena floor, sending cracks radiating outward. Guards scattered as the massive dragon strode toward Ethan, his pale blue eyes clear for the first time in 30 years. "Young rider," Thane spoke in the ancient draconic tongue, "I knew your bloodline. Your great-grandmother flew with my clutch brother before the betrayal." Ethan felt tears stinging his eyes as inherited memories surfaced, showing him glimpses of a red-haired woman soaring through nebulae on the back of a golden dragon. "Grandmother Rebecca," he whispered. "She told me stories, But I thought they were just legends. Legends have a way of becoming reality when the need is great enough, Thane replied, lowering his great head in acknowledgement of the bond he could sense forming. But not all the freed dragons retained enough of their original selves to resist conditioning. Several dropped into the arena with murder in their eyes, their minds damaged by years of neural manipulation to recognize what was happening. Ethan pressed his hands to his temples, feeling the bond expand beyond his physical form. Through the network connecting all dragons, he sensed every captive creature in the complex. Hundreds of them, their spirits broken but not destroyed, were not leaving anyone behind. He declared, his voice carrying new authority that made even Thane's ancient eyes widen in recognition. The great liberation power flowing through Ethan was intoxicating and terrifying. He could feel the potential to reshape reality itself, to reach into the quantum foundations of the neural implants and simply will them out of existence. But such power came with a price, and he sensed that using it carelessly would burn him out like an overloaded circuit. Instead, he focused on something smaller, but no less significant. Placing his hands on Piraxis's neck, he channeled the awakening bond into a focused beam of pure intention, the neural implant embedded in her skull. A device that had controlled her for 50 years began to crack and spark. With a sound like breaking crystal, the implant shattered. Piraxis threw back her head and roared, but this time it was pure joy. For the first time in half a century, her mind was completely her own. The effect rippled outward through the dragon network. Shadowmaw felt his own implant failing as Ethan's power touched him through the bond. Thane's ancient device, already weakened by decades of resistance, crumbled to dust. One by one, the neural implants of every dragon in the Colosseum began to fail. High Inquisitor Valdris, seated in the religious section, felt his heart racing as he witnessed prophecy becoming reality. The pale, six-limbed priest had spent decades studying forbidden texts, believing them to be primitive mythology. Now, as golden light emanated from the human-dragon bond, he realized the ancient warnings were true. The flame of unity burns again, he whispered in his native tongue, his translator struggling to find equivalent words. The old gods awaken. Kithar's rage echoed across the arena as his most secure prison became a liberation zone. All units, converge on the arena. I want orbital strikes on my position if necessary. But his panic was well-founded. Across the Colosseum complex, dragons were breaking free. Some, like veteran warriors who had retained core memories, immediately sought out humans they could sense carried the old blood. Others, too damaged by years of conditioning, simply fled into the sky, their wings carrying them toward freedom they had almost forgotten existed. Zoe carved through the last of the guard units, blocking their escape route, her hybrid physiology giving her endurance beyond normal human limits. Whatever you're doing, do it faster, she called out, pointing toward arena entrances where reinforcements poured in. We've got company coming. But Ethan was deep in concentration. His awareness expanded beyond physical form. Through the bond network, he could sense not just the dragons in the Colosseum, but others across the planet. In breeding facilities, in military compounds, in private collections of the wealthy. Thousands of dragons felt the call of freedom. Dr. Phoenix Ashworth, humanity's leading xenobiologist, was conducting research in a hidden laboratory 50 miles away when every dragon on the planet simultaneously looked toward the Colosseum. She had been studying dragon genetics for years, searching for clues about the ancient bond her grandmother had described in coded journals. By the stars, she breathed, watching as the dragons in her sanctuary began to sing. It was a sound she had never heard before, a harmony that seemed to resonate with something deep in her DNA. It's happening. The prophecy is real. Back in the arena, the corrupted dragons had stopped their advance. The ones whose minds had been too damaged to fully heal were experiencing moments of clarity for the first time in decades. They stood confused and trembling, caught between programmed rage and awakening memory. Ethan reached out to them with his mind, his consciousness touching the edges of shattered psyches. I can feel them, he said, his voice filled with wonder and sorrow. They're still in there, buried under all the conditioning. One of the damaged dragons, A scarred veteran named Grimscale took a tentative step forward. His red eyes, clouded by years of forced madness, flickered with recognition. "Rider," he whispered, the word foreign on his tongue after so long. "Yes," Ethan replied, extending his hand. "I'm here." "We're all here." As human touched dragon, another neural implant cracked and fell away. Grimscale's eyes cleared, memories flooding back of a time before captivity, before the endless cycle of violence and pain. He wept, great tears streaming down his scaled cheeks. The scene was repeated across the arena as more corrupted dragons approached. Not all could be saved. Some had been too thoroughly broken, but many felt the touch of the ancient bond and remembered what they had lost. Piraxis spread her wings wide, her golden scales catching the light like burnished armor. "Riders," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the Colosseum. "It is time to reclaim the skies." Ethan climbed onto her back, the movement feeling as natural as breathing. Muscle memory inherited from his ancestors guided him as he settled into the natural riding position. Round the arena, other dragons lowered themselves to allow their chosen riders to mount. Zoe hesitated only a moment before approaching Shadowmaw. The black dragon studied her with ancient eyes, sensing the mixed heritage that made her unique. "You carry both bloods," he observed. "Perhaps that makes you twice as strong." "Only one way to find out," she replied, grasping his offered claw and pulling herself up onto his neck. Thane had chosen a young human mechanic named Jake Stormrider, who had been working in the arena's maintenance tunnels when the liberation began. The man's calloused hands shook as he touched the silver dragon scales, but his eyes burned with the same defiance that had marked his species' long struggle for freedom. Above them, Kithara activated the Colosseum's defense systems. Energy cannons emerged from hidden positions, their targeting computers struggling to lock onto the chaotic scene below. "Destroy them all," he screamed. "I will not let this rebellion spread." But as the weapons powered up, something unexpected happened. The ancient stone of the Colosseum itself began to respond to the dragon rider's presence. Carved runes that had been dormant for millennia started to glow with inner fire. The building had been constructed on the site of an old dragon temple, and the awakening power was calling to its buried magic. Energy bolts fired from the defense systems struck the glowing runes and dissipated harmlessly. The Colosseum's own defenses, designed to protect the dragons within, had awakened to shield them once more. "Impossible," Kithara breathed, his crystalline features contorting with disbelief. "The old magic is just superstition." Ethan looked up at the alien overlord and smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "You made one mistake, Kithara," he called out, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush. "You assumed the dragons were yours to command." He pressed his heels gently against Piraxis's flanks, and the golden dragon launched herself into the air with a thunderous beat of her wings. Around them, dozens of other riders followed suit, the sky filling with dragons and their human companions. "But they were never your slaves," Ethan continued as they rose above the Colosseum walls. "They were waiting for someone who remembered the old words, the old ways. The sky belongs to dragons." The sight of dragons filling the sky above the Colosseum sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian Empire that would be felt for generations. News feeds across 1,000 worlds carried the impossible image: humans riding dragons, soaring through the crimson sky of Valdris Prime like legends made manifest. Ethan felt the wind rushing past his face as Piraxis climbed higher, her powerful wings carrying them toward the clouds. Below, the Colosseum looked like a child's toy, its massive structure dwarfed by the perspective of true flight. For the first time in months, he felt free, but freedom came with responsibility. Through the bond network, he could sense dragons across the planet crying out for liberation. Military facilities, private estates, research centers, everywhere the Zephyrians had kept his species' ancient allies in captivity. The call of the awakened bond was being heard. "We need to coordinate this." Zoe's voice reached him over the calm system built into Shadowmaw's harness. She had adapted quickly to dragon flight, her hybrid reflexes helping her anticipate her mount's movements. "If we just charge in randomly, we'll be overwhelmed." Ethan nodded, then realized she couldn't see the gesture. "Piraxis," he said aloud, knowing the dragon would share his thoughts. Through their bond, can you connect me to all the freed dragons? The golden dragon's consciousness expanded, touching the minds of every liberated creature in their growing flight. Suddenly, Ethan found himself at the center of a vast network of draconic intelligence. He could sense Thane's ancient wisdom, Shadowmaw's tactical knowledge, and the fierce joy of dozens of newly freed dragons. Listen to me, he projected to all of them. We're not just escaping, we're starting a revolution. But if we're going to succeed, we need to be smart about it. Ethan felt a spark of hope. Phoenix Base was humanity's most secret research facility, hidden in the asteroid belt between Valdris Prime and its largest moon. If they could reach it, they'd have a staging ground for larger operations. Pure access. Can we make it that far? He asked. The dragon's laughter rumbled through their bond. Young rider, I have been dreaming of deep space flight for 50 years. Try to keep up. She folded her wings and dove toward the planet's upper atmosphere, her body beginning to glow with an inner fire. Ethan felt his breath catch as he realized what was happening. Dragons didn't need spacecraft to travel between worlds. Their bodies were living starships, capable of surviving in the vacuum of space. Behind them, other dragons followed suit. The sight of 30 dragons breaking atmosphere under their own power was unprecedented in recorded history. Zephyrian space traffic control centers across the system went into emergency mode as their sensors detected the impossible flight paths. Admiral Vex Stormclaw, commander of the Third Fleet, watched the tactical displays with growing disbelief. How are they doing that? Dragons can't survive in space, his aide, a nervous young officer named Korvuk, consulted his datapad frantically. Sir, according to these readings, they're generating some kind of protective field, and their acceleration, it's off the charts. Intercept them, Stormclaw ordered. Deploy all available fighters. I want those creatures destroyed before they can reach the outer system. But as the sleek Zephyrian interceptors streaked toward the Dragon flight, they encountered something their designers had never anticipated. The dragons moved through space like living missiles, their natural agility translating into impossible maneuvers that no artificial craft could match. Shadowmaw demonstrated this as 3 fighters converged on his position. Instead of trying to outrun them, he executed a spiral that would have liquefied any organic pilot, his body twisting through dimensions that conventional physics insisted were impossible. His wings, somehow still providing thrust and vacuum, carry him behind the lead fighter. What happened next made Zephyrian military historians rewrite their tactical manuals. Shadowmaw breathed lightning directly into the fighter's engines, not the directed beam of a weapon, but the chaotic fury of a natural storm. The craft's shields, designed to stop energy weapons, offered no protection against raw electrical discharge that seemed to ignore conventional physics. Across the battle space, other dragons demonstrated abilities that had been suppressed by decades of captivity. Piraxis exhaled streams of plasma that burned through armor like paper. Thane generated gravitic fields that crushed enemy vessels, while newer riders discovered their mounts could phase through solid matter when pressed. The Zephyrian fleet, pride of a galactic empire, found itself outmaneuvered by creatures they had dismissed as mere animals. Within minutes, half their interceptors were disabled or destroyed, their crews evacuating in escape pods. Fall back, Admiral Stormclaw ordered, his voice cracking with disbelief. All units, fall back to the fleet anchorage. But Ethan had no intention of pursuing them. Through the bond network, he could sense something far more important than military victory. On the outer rim of the system, a massive Zephyrian research station hung in orbit around a dead world. And within that station, he sensed the presence of thousands of dragons. That's our target, he told the others. Station Omega-7, there, holding our people there. Dr. Phoenix Ashworth's voice came through the calm again, urgent with discovery. Ethan, I've been analyzing the sensor data from your escape. The way you broke those neural implants, that's not just psychic power. You're somehow manipulating quantum entanglement at the cellular level. It's like you're rewriting the fundamental code of reality. The implications hit him like a physical blow. If he could manipulate quantum fields on that scale, then the bond between humans and dragons was far more than just telepathic connection. It was a form of applied physics that the Zephyrians had never understood. "Phoenix," he said, "run a deep scan on Station Omega-7. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with." As the Dragon flight approached the research station, its massive bulk became visible against the starfield. The facility was the size of a small moon, its crystalline spires reaching out like grasping fingers. Somewhere within that maze of laboratories and holding cells, thousands of dragons waited for freedom, but they weren't the only ones waiting. As the station's defense systems came online, Ethan realized they were flying into a trap. Kithra's voice echoed across the calm frequencies, transmitted from the station's command center. "Welcome, young rider," the Overlord's words dripped with malice. "I was hoping you would come here. You see, Station Omega-7 is not just a research facility. It's the birthplace of Project Mindbreak, our ultimate weapon against your kind." Ethan felt ice forming in his veins as energy barriers sprang up around the station, trapping the Dragon flight within their web. "What is Project Mindbreak?" Kithra's laughter was like breaking glass. "The complete neural mapping of Dragon consciousness. We've been studying your ancient bond for decades, learning to replicate it, control it, weaponize it. And now, thanks to your dramatic escape, we have the final piece of the puzzle, a living Dragon rider." The station's weapons systems came online, not energy cannons, but something far more insidious. Psychic dampeners designed to sever the bond between rider and dragon, leaving both vulnerable to capture. As the fields activated, Ethan felt his connection to Piraxis beginning to fade. "No," he whispered, fighting against the artificial interference. "We came too far to lose now." But even as the dampeners worked to separate them, Ethan felt something else awakening within the station. The thousands of captive dragons, sensing their kin so close to freedom, began to sing. Their voices rose in harmony, a sound that resonated through both physical and psychic dimensions. And in that song, Ethan heard something that made his heart soar with hope. They weren't just singing for rescue. They were singing a battle hymn, preparing to break free from within while their liberators fought from without. The final confrontation was about to begin, and the fate of two species hung in the balance. The legend reborn psychic dampeners surrounding Station Omega-7 created a web of interference that should have been impossible to break. For decades, Zephyrian scientists had perfected the technology, testing it on countless dragons to ensure no bond could survive its influence. But they had never encountered a bond as deep as the one between Ethan and Piraxis. Instead of fighting the dampening field, Ethan did something unexpected. He embraced it, letting the artificial interference wash over him while diving deeper into the quantum connection that Phoenix had identified. If the Zephyrians were manipulating surface-level neural patterns, he would reach into the fundamental forces that bound all matter together. What are you doing?" Zoe's voice came through the comm, strained with effort as she fought to maintain her connection with Shadowmaw. "Something that should be impossible," Ethan replied, his consciousness expanding beyond his physical form. Through the quantum substrate of reality itself, he could sense every dragon in the station, their genetic patterns resonating like musical notes in a cosmic symphony. The song of the captive dragons grew louder, their voices combining in harmonies that made the station's hull vibrate. But it wasn't just sound. It was a form of quantum communication that bypassed the dampeners entirely. Each voice carried genetic memories, battle tactics, and most importantly, hope. Kithra's face appeared on the station's external monitors, his crystalline features twisted with rage and fear. "Impossible. The dampeners should have severed your connection completely. You made a fundamental error," Ethan said, his voice carrying across both radio frequencies and the quantum network. "You assumed the bond was in our minds, but it's written into the very structure of spacetime itself." Within the station, Dr. Nexus Voidcaller, the Zephyrian scientist in charge of Project Mindbreak, watched his instruments with growing alarm. The humans' biometric readings were off the charts, showing levels of quantum manipulation that should have been lethal to any organic being. "Supreme Overlord," he reported to Kithara, "the subject is somehow accessing zero-point energy fields. If he continues at this rate, he could destabilize the station's power core." But Ethan wasn't interested in destroying the station. He was transforming it. Reaching out through the quantum network, he touched the consciousness of every dragon, held captive within the facility. One by one, their neural implants began to crack and shatter, not from external force, but from internal resonance as their true selves awakened. The effect was catastrophic for the Zephyrian research program. In Laboratory Complex 7, a massive dragon named Cosmos Flamerite broke free from his restraints for the first time in 60 years. His scales, once dull gray from captivity, blazed with inner fire as ancient memories flooded back. "For the sky roads of home," he roared, his voice carrying the authority of a creature who had once been a general in the dragon armies. Energy, cages that had held him dissolved like morning mist as he breathed true dragonfire. Not the controlled flames of captivity, but the unbridled fury of a free spirit. Across the station, similar scenes played out as hundreds of dragons remembered who they had been before capture. Some had been scholars, others warriors, still others artists and healers. All had been reduced to test subjects and weapons, but now they were becoming themselves again. Dr. Voidcaller's laboratory filled with alarms as his most prized specimens began their escape. "Security teams to all levels," he screamed into his communicator. "Contain the breaches before they reach the primary systems." But the dragons weren't just escaping. They were liberating their kin. Stella Nightsong, a silver dragon who had retained her memories through decades of psychological conditioning, used her knowledge of the station's layout to guide others to the holding cells. Her voice, beautiful even in fury, carried commands in the ancient dragon tongue that overrode years of programming. "Sisters and brothers," she sang, "remember the sky, remember the wind beneath your wings, remember freedom outside the station." The battle between the dragon flight and Zephyrian forces had reached a stalemate. The energy barriers prevented escape, but the station's weapons couldn't target the dragons without risking damage to their own facility. It was Admiral Stormclaw who broke the deadlock with a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "All ships, target the station's docking bays," he ordered. "If we can't capture them, we'll trap them inside and let the internal defenses finish them." But as Zephyrian warships opened fire on their own facility, something remarkable happened. The freed dragons inside the station didn't flee toward the docking bays. They moved toward the power core. Led by Cosmos Flamerite and Stella Nightsong, they began to sing in perfect harmony, their voices combining in a frequency that resonated with the station's crystalline structure. Ethan felt the change immediately through the quantum network. They're not trying to escape, he realized. They're turning the entire station into a resonance weapon. The implications were staggering. If hundreds of dragons could synchronize their natural frequencies with the station's structure, they could create a harmonic cascade that would disable every Zephyrian ship in the system. But the process would require perfect timing and absolute trust between species that had been enemies for generations. All dragons, inside and out. Ethan projected through the network. "Prepare for harmonic convergence on my mark." Through the bond, he felt the response of every freed dragon. Some were ancient veterans who remembered the old alliance. Others were young creatures experiencing freedom for the first time. All were united in their determination to ensure this moment would never be forgotten. Kithara realized what was happening just seconds before it began. "Stop them," he screamed at his technicians. "Overload the power core if you have to. We cannot let them complete the resonance." But it was too late. On Ethan's signal, every dragon in the system began to sing, not the chaotic roar of battle, but a precise harmonic pattern that had been passed down through genetic memory for millennia. It was the song of liberation, the ancient anthem that had once freed an entire galaxy from tyranny. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The resonance cascade spread outward from Station Omega-7 like a wave of pure sound, washing over Zephyrian ships and installations. Electronic systems overloaded, weapons powered down, and neural implants throughout the fleet shattered simultaneously. But the song did more than disable technology. It awakened something in every creature that heard it. On ships throughout the system, enslaved beings from a dozen different species felt their conditioning break. Zephyrian soldiers found themselves questioning orders they had followed without thought. Even some of the crystalline overlords experienced moments of doubt about their empire's righteousness. As the cascade faded, the energy barriers around the station collapsed. The Dragon flight was free to depart, but they weren't alone. From the station's docking bays poured hundreds of liberated dragons, their wings carrying them toward the open sky for the first time in decades. Ethan guided Piraxis toward the largest group of freed dragons, his heart swelling with joy as he saw the wonder in their eyes. These were beings who had almost forgotten what it meant to fly, to choose their own path, to be truly alive. "Where will you go?" he asked Cosmos Flameright as the massive dragon approached. The ancient general's eyes blazed with purpose. "To every world where our kind are held captive," he replied. "To every system where tyranny masquerades as order. The song has been sung, young rider. Now it must be carried to the furthest reaches of the galaxy." Dr. Phoenix Ashworth's voice crackled over the calm from her hidden base. "Ethan, you need to see this. The harmonic cascade didn't just affect this system. It's propagating through subspace. Dragon liberation events are being reported across the entire sector." The implications were staggering. In a single moment, they had not just freed the dragons of Valdris Prime, but had triggered a chain reaction that would topple the foundations of the Zephyrian Empire. The bond between human and dragon, dormant for 1,000 years, had reawakened with a power that transcended space and time. As the liberated dragons dispersed to carry their message of freedom to distant worlds, Ethan remained with Piraxis, watching the stars that now seemed full of infinite possibility. He had been sentenced to die in Dragonfire, but instead, he had become something greater than he had ever imagined. The legend of the Dragon Riders had been reborn, and the galaxy would never be the same. In years to come, children of 100 species would hear the story of the human who spoke the ancient words and awakened the bond that broke an empire. They would learn that even in the darkest hour, hope could take wing, and somewhere in the vast cosmos, dragons and their human partners continued to sing the song of liberation, carrying the promise of freedom to every corner of the universe. The sky belonged to dragons once more, and with them flew the dreams of all who dared to reach for the stars. The end.